turning a blind eye.
The results are in from the world's largest study into the side effects of COVID vaccines.
A startling new report shows the U.S. government is ignoring COVID vaccine side effects, and they're terrifying.
Miscarriages, heart attacks, myocarditis, permanent disability, neurological problems.
Less than 1 in 5 injury claims have been investigated, and there are even more Americans out there who haven't come forward or sadly cannot. The Insider.
Hope Hicks. Hope Hicks.
Hope Hicks. Longtime aide Hope Hicks testifies everything in the Trump campaign ran through Trump himself.
We want Hope, right? She's shy, but not that shy.
Cry for help. Britney Spears says nothing to see here after paramedics are called to a West Hollywood hotel. No puns here. Can anyone save this woman from herself? And they're off.
It's the Kentucky Derby.
Derby Days brings new concerns for the safety of the horses that run for the roses.
Mage wins the 149th running of the Kentucky Derby.
And we come on the air tonight with breaking news, live pictures of New York City, where the most damning testimony in Trump's hush money case wrapped up just hours ago. Hope Hicks, one of Donald Trump's closest aides, took the stand today, admitting early on that she was very nervous with her boss, former President Trump, just steps away. Hicks told jurors that when it came to Trump and his 2016 campaign, everyone was just following his lead. Prosecutors pushed her on a range of events and meetings dating back to 2015. And we're going to break down every bit of her testimony and what it means for the former president in just a moment. But first, did you see these headlines? The medical crisis that no one is talking about, but we should be. Thousands of Americans are living with debilitating health issues after getting the COVID vaccine. Many of them say that they feel forgotten. They also can't find help that they desperately need. The New York Times spent more than a year investigating a series of stories from these helpless victims. You can see the title here. Thousands believe COVID vaccines harm them. Is anyone listening? While we all know vaccines do have occasional side effects, the people who they interviewed say that they were injured by the COVID vaccines and they feel like their cases have been ignored. We really want to be clear that this is not a political segment and it's not an anti-vaccination segment. It's also not really something that we're judging when it comes to the pandemic. It's about the investigation into whether thousands of Americans are simply not getting access to health care that could turn their lives around. Meanwhile, we're all facing a barrage of advertisements and PR campaigns just like this.
Have you ever wondered what an icon, a legend, a legacy, a pop star, and a tight end all have in common? They all got this season's updated COVID-19 shot.
Got it. Got it.
I mean, you can't deny it. It's usually pushed on us. For many, it was a modern-day miracle, right? Undoubtedly saving lives. More than 270 million Americans received the vaccine, 677 million doses. The overwhelming majority of people didn't feel the side effects, but that doesn't mean that we can't have real and honest conversations about the thousands of people who did. So with us now, Dr. Ashish Jha, former White House COVID-19 response coordinator. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. You know, I spoke with someone who is experiencing some incredibly severe symptoms today. It was an emotional conversation. I just want to get your reaction, first and foremost, from the New York Times piece.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me here. It was a really important piece, and I think the idea that we are not listening to people who feel like they've been suffering from this vaccine is awful. We absolutely need to be listening to them. And I think you set it up perfectly. Look, these vaccines ended the pandemic. They saved millions of lives, but it doesn't mean that there aren't people who, whether they actually were injured by the vaccines or feel like they were, doesn't mean that we don't take them seriously, and it doesn't mean that we don't understand what's happening with them.
So one of the victims who I spoke with felt as if, yes, that this vaccine did save lives, but at what cost? So what is your response to that?
Yeah, look, I think the cost benefit here is very clear. Look, thousands of Americans were dying every day. And at the height of the pandemic, the vaccines totally turned it around. So there's no question in my mind these vaccines were extremely effective. They were largely very safe. Just always remind people, 90% of American adults got at least one shot. So most Americans have had them. Most Americans have not had side effects. But the people who have, we should identify what's going on with them, and we should figure out how to help them.
Right. Moving forward, I want to talk to you a little bit about, and perhaps you can speak to it, how people are able to get help. Because it says here, as of April, just over 13,000 vaccine injury compensation claims have been filed, but to no avail. Only 19% have been reviewed. Could we do better? What can we do to do better with some of these folks?
Yeah, so in my mind, there are two parts of this. First of all, is we got to speed up reviews of these things. People who have been injured should not have to wait months or years to get an answer. Second is, we have some traditional things we look at. We probably have to expand the definition or think about, are there new conditions that are vaccine injuries that we haven't identified before? This requires research. It requires, what's really a vaccine injury, what's not. We've got to be focused on that as well. I think we just can do a lot better for these folks. It'll also help build confidence in the vaccine system, reminding people that while it's safe for most people, if you are injured, you'll get taken care of.
I think that's sort of my next question is why is it taking so long? Why isn't the government doing better? Why aren't we bringing attention to some of these people who are suffering and saying, we can do better by you, and here is how we can assist you?
Yeah, I worry a little bit that what has happened is we've gotten caught in the sort of politics of this, which is, again, why I loved your beginning of your sentiment. This is not a political piece. Because, as you know, there are a lot of people who've become very anti-vaccine. And so that means that a lot of doctors see these patients and worry that if they acknowledge that person's suffering, that somehow they're becoming anti-vaccine themselves. I take care of people. I remind people it doesn't matter. I'm very pro-vaccines. I got them. Everyone in my family got them. Still, I think we have to acknowledge this. That is not just happening among doctors. It's happening inside the government. We just have to do better.
And that's sort of what I'm worried about. Are we isolating these victims? The gentleman who I spoke with today is not anti-vaccination. I mean, he is someone who has worked in the healthcare industry, but he now feels like he is ostracized and now can't come forward. He's afraid. I mean, people are scared.
Yeah, so there's a problem here. And by the way, we're obviously talking about people who may have been injured by vaccines. A lot of people with long COVID who got COVID and have had symptoms feel often the same way. They go to the doctor's like, this is all in your head. There's a long tradition in medicine of when we as doctors don't understand something, we actually blame the patient and say, it's in your head, it's your fault, this is not real. This has been a problem in medicine forever. We have got to do better as doctors. I always remind myself, there are lots of conditions where we don't know what's going on initially, but we learn over time. That's the approach, that's the humble approach that medicine has to take. And that's the approach that our government has to take as well.
Right. Well, I'm grateful that you joined us tonight. My thoughts and prayers are with the people who are suffering, and perhaps they can find comfort to know that there are others. And I'm grateful for your expertise tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so perhaps you saw the headlines. It was an emotional day in New York. One of former President Trump's top aides broke down on the stand while testifying about what she witnessed during the scandal involving the former president and Stormy Daniels. We're talking about Hope Hicks. She testified about the Trump campaign's efforts to cover up accusations against him after he told his team to, quote, deny, deny, deny. This was on the stand. She also answered some damaging questions on Trump's relationship with the National Enquirer's David Pecker and efforts to do political damage to both Ted Cruz and Dr. Ben Carson. As you know, those are two of his rivals for the Republican nomination back in 2016. But she minced no words when it came to Michael Cohen. Perhaps no surprise there. Hicks says that Trump told her that Cohen paid off Stormy Daniels with his own money, quote, out of the kindness of his heart. But when asked if she agreed if Cohen would protect Trump in such a way, she responded, quote, that would be out of character for him. She also testified that Cohen often tried to interject himself into the campaign, saying, quote, he liked to call himself a fixer or Mr. Fix-It, and it was only because he first broke it. She agreed when the defense asked if Cohen was capable of going rogue. That testimony was the last the jury heard this week. Testimony that could be very damaging to the prosecution. So joining me now is Randy Zellin, white-collar federal criminal defense attorney and former New York attorney. Sir, thank you for joining us. First and foremost, Randy, just your reaction from today. It was a pretty big day.
Yes, it was a big day, but it was more importantly a good day. My position has always been that if Hope Hicks' testimony does not put the former president in the room, establishing that he knew that there were going to be false entries made in the books and records of the Trump organization, and that those false entries were made to cover up the fact that he was concerned that he'd lose the election if it got out, if these affairs got out. If she could not establish that, there is no way in God's green earth that the former president is going to be convicted. And that's exactly what she did not do. In fact, she brought up the M word. She brought up Melania. And that really is the former president's best defense, which is, I didn't do this because I was trying to influence the election. How about I did this because I was trying to influence my marriage?
Well, and to elaborate on that, you're right. She did talk about how he was very concerned that she would see some of these headlines, and he was trying to make sure that his wife didn't necessarily get the papers that day. To elaborate on your first answer, did we learn of anything new today, or was it more a rehash of dirty laundry? And did we learn of any criminal behavior today that can be used by the prosecution?
Certainly, we learned more because Ms. Hicks did put the former president in the room, and it seems like the prosecution is trying to build building blocks. The problem is it's not a house that is strong enough to hold up to the wind of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But I'm not certainly going to sit here and say that the prosecution didn't score points. They certainly established that the president knew that he was concerned about the election, that he was aware of the importance of deny. But everyone must understand that the burden of proof on the prosecution, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, is an incredibly high bar. It is, I don't need any more information to make an important decision. And if I do, that is an acquittal. And this trial has been about sleaze. It's been about Michael Cohen being a fixer. It's been about Alan Weisselberg. It's been really about everything other than, did the former president say, I want those entries to reflect legal fees so I can win this election? And the answer is no.
Right. Like you're saying, the crux of it, the legality of it. You brought up Michael Cohen because I want to take a look back at the week in its entirety. The defense's strategy of pushing him a lot, is that a good strategy? Or should they have stepped back and say, this is a non-disclosure agreement, and really just sort of left him alone?
This trial, the more this trial becomes about Michael Cohen, the greater the odds are that the former president either gets acquitted or there is at least one juror who says, I am not convicting. And unfortunately for the prosecution, Mr. Cohen walks in not with the baggage of being a convicted felon. That, to me, would be silly for the defense team to focus too much on. What is important is that Mr. Cohen was a fixer. Mr. Cohen was there. He was put on this earth to fix the former president's problems, just take care of it. So if I'm the defense, I'm embracing Michael Cohen's power. I am embracing Michael Cohen's ability to fix things and to take things on his own. And let's face it, if there was ever a time that Mr. Cohen had a motive to show the president how invaluable he was, it was then, because Mr. Cohen had his sights set on the White House.
Okay, before I let you go, you mentioned building blocks. What do you expect for next week?
Well, I think at some point it's probably a good idea for the prosecution to actually put Mr. Cohen on so we can all stop prognosticating. We can all stop reading tea leaves. We can all stop divining, and let's hear it.
Right. All right, Randy, it's a pleasure to be with you, my friend. I'm sure we're going to hear more from you another week in New York. So grateful to have you. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
All right. right, up next, we don't have to tell you, right? The 150th running of the Kentucky Derby has so many questioning the safety of Sports of King's biggest stars. So does horse racing do enough to ensure the safety of the thoroughbreds who thrill audiences for the most exciting 2 minutes in sports? And you've seen the video and you've seen the picture. Britney Spears taking to Instagram to say that paramedics showed up at her door illegally and harassed her when they were called to her hotel room. She also said she's getting stronger every day, but why are so many people so genuinely worried about her? Well, we probably don't need to tell you about tomorrow, right? The 150th Kentucky Derby. It's front and center. Everyone's talking about it. It's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. But instead, most people are talking not about bets or picking out their hats, really about the safety of horses.
When the money's on the line, there's always going to be people looking to take an edge.
It's a win-now culture, and you see more horses dying.
We got to get rid of all these drugs.
Nobody believed that anybody was going to jail for this behavior.
This is the inflection point. If we don't act, it may be too late.
Amazing piece by the New York Times. Last year, at least a dozen horses died in the days surrounding the Derby. Did you know that, or were you focused on the race? Churchill Downs, as you know, where the race is called, and the deaths were called unusually high, but their headline sparked outrage, questioning everyone, not just fans of the sports. The unprecedented euthanizations caused Churchill Downs to cease races for investigations. Joining me now is Lisa Lazarus. So she's the Chief Executive Officer of the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. You know, the most exciting 2 minutes in sports tomorrow. And for a lot of people, it may look like years prior, but there's a lot that has changed year to date. What is different about tomorrow's race?
So really, there are three areas that are different. One is around the surface that a horse races on. Those have been optimized. Every possible checks and balance have been in place to make sure that they are safe for the horses to run on. The second is that we have enhanced veterinary protocols, so making sure that the horses are properly inspected before they actually get to the track and get to the starting gate. And the third is the first time there's a uniform anti-doping program in place that is the same across the nation.
So how did we get here, Lisa? When you look at the system, I mean, is it systemic? Is it the veterinarians? Is it the horse owners? Is it the labs where the tests are being tested?
You know, it's a number of factors that we look at when we look to see what contributed to a horse's injury or a horse's breakdown. And, you know, really it's all of the things that are important. And the most, I think, significant thing that we've done differently is that we now have a national uniform body that can actually oversee all these areas and make sure that, you know, all of the veterinary practices are optimized, the service is safe, and that, of course, that horses don't have anything in their system that shouldn't be there.
What have you learned in just the past year when you do your investigation? Where do you find really the most vulnerabilities in the sport?
So what we really find is that in order for horses to be safe on Derby Day, they need to be safe all year round. And so what we found is that we need to make sure that all of the same protections and protocols and scrutiny that are available for horses on Derby Day are in place throughout the year, because horses are coming from, you know, different racetracks around the country, and that uniformity is so important. And we feel that because this year is the first time we've had that uniformity across all of our programs, we are much better positioned to control the outcome and to make sure that the conditions are as best as they can be for horses.
To me, Lisa, that sounds like a really heavy load. I mean, I would imagine that there's so much that goes on behind the scenes in the other 364 remaining days of the year where I am not watching horses on the main stage. How are you able to manage that?
Yeah, no, there is an incredible amount of work and thought that goes into sort of rolling out this program and making sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to keep horses safe. And we've used every resource. We've built an incredible team, and we think about every single horse across the country at every single race. It's not just the Derby, but there are horses racing across all of our states, throughout the year. We need to make sure that we keep them just as safe as we keep the Derby horses.
Okay, but what about if there's international participants? If I'm not mistaken, there are some this year, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And we basically collaborate with those international jurisdictions to make sure that we have insight to all of the veterinary records. Those horses still have to comply with the same regulations and give us the same information through our uniform portal. And in addition to that, we do out-of-competition testing through collaborations on these same horses.
Okay, so if you look at someone like Bob Raffert, first of all, can you introduce him to some of our viewers who may not be familiar? But maybe some of these owners, some of these trainers who have been doing this maybe for generations. How do you work with them? How do you institute systemic change? And to some people who, as I mentioned, have been doing this sport for generations.
Yeah, no, you've hit on a really important point. It really is all about, cultural change and mindset and making sure that everyone recognizes that if we want to protect this incredible sport and have it around forever, we need to collaborate and work together to make sure that everybody, sees and knows that we prioritize our horses' welfare, our horses' safety above all else, and that we're making sure that that the sport is really clean and that everyone's got a fair chance to compete under the same conditions. And so the way that we do that is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you before I let you go, what is viewership like? Do you have the same support that you had 10 years ago?
So, I would say that right now the support is really building now that I think there's an understanding that there's so much effort being put into keeping horses safe. I think when the public questions that it's a lot more difficult for us to sustain our popularity. But having now a national uniform organization that actually is overseeing everything and has eyes on, the entire country throughout the year, I think that folks are starting to really kind of accept that and believe that the future is pretty bright for horse racing.
All right, Lisa, I'm grateful for your time. Good luck tomorrow. I know it's a busy time for you. Thank you for your time this evening.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
As universities in Israel tell students in the U.S. to come join them and study over there, John Ondrasik of Five for Fighting continues to fight on behalf of the hostages as families are still holding out hope that they will be reunited. Welcome back. As Israel and Hamas continue to negotiate a possible ceasefire and return of hostages, family members of those being held are remaining hopeful and vocal. Jonathan Rice writes in the New York Times, quote, "Hope rises among relatives of hostages as signs of progress in talks reported." While there is hope for a deal, Rice quotes a cousin of one of the hostages, Shay Dickman, "I want to believe my country cares about my cousin's life." NewsNation national correspondent Robert Sherman is live for us overseas. Robert, what can you tell us about the latest?
Well, Elizabeth, this deal has been sitting in front of Hamas for days on end now. They've been poring over it, analyzing it, talking with negotiators and trying to get some clarity on a few of the tenets. Tonight, the deal is still potentially alive as these talks are ongoing and set to pick up in Cairo tomorrow. Hamas will be sending a delegation there, and they say that they're sending that delegation in good spirits. They put out a statement in which they said, quote, that they are determined to secure an agreement that fulfills the Palestinians' demands. They're placing a focus on the withdrawal of Israeli troops, reconstruction of Gaza, and the exchange of hostages for prisoners. On the ground here in Israel, you've seen these demonstrations of hostage families taking place for days on end. The calls to get a deal done have been growing louder. The position of many of these hostage families is that the Israeli government should cut a deal, any deal that they can make in order to get their loved ones home. The Israeli government saying this week that at this point, they've come to the table, they've made negotiations, and they believe it's time for Hamas to come the rest of the way.
With these negotiations, the only thing preventing a hostage deal is Hamas. Israel has come again and again to the negotiating table and has made very difficult concessions on our end to bring our people home.
And with the sun setting here in Israel, it's now Shabbat. People are celebrating with their families. It's also the first Shabbat since Passover, a holy time as people hold on to hope that there will be good news for their loved ones. There is this, though, Elizabeth, there is this sticking point that needs to be addressed, is that Hamas is looking for a deal that's going to lead to the end of the war. Israel says the war will not end until Hamas is destroyed, until they go into Rafah. So navigating that difference is going to be key in order to getting a deal done. Elizabeth?
Wow, just can't imagine those families. All right, Robert, thank you so much. Stay safe. So many artists in the music industry love to show their support for a good cause. We don't have to tell you that. But in the case of defending Israel, it's been a little bit of a different tone. One artist, however, is not keeping his head down. Matthew Hennessy writes in the Wall Street Journal, "5 for fighting, a lone voice sings for Israel. John Ondrasik won't let his industry forget those slaughtered at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. So Grammy-nominated 5 for fighting singer and songwriter John Ondrasik joins me now. John, as I mentioned, I'm so grateful that you're joining us, and I want to start with this question. I know the answer. Our viewers do not. Are you Jewish, sir, and do you have Jewish relatives?
I'm not, Elizabeth, and I understand why people ask the question, but I think a better question would be, where's everybody else in the music industry? You don't have to be Jewish to condemn the evil that is Hamas. You just have to be human. You have to have a heart. You have to have a brain. And the silence of the artists in the music industry is historically shameful, including the Jewish artists who seem to have nothing to say about Hamas.
I'm curious about, I want to talk to you so our viewers understand just how receptive the Israeli government was, the whole country. But before I do, how receptive were the executives here in the United States to your song?
You know, there are a few executives, Jewish executives, that have been standing up for Israel. They actually sent my song and video to the Grammys, knowing they would never play it. But the artists, you know, I was honored to play the concert for New York, and every living artist stood up for America and stood up against Osama bin Laden. But 20 years later, it's crickets. Again, it's a disgrace. But we're standing up for Israel. As you're showing there, I was honored to go play at Hostage Square for the hostage families, play my new song, OK, play Superman, and let them know that whatever they're seeing on television, the vast majority of Americans support them. They pray for the hostages to come home. The mobs on campuses do not speak for America.
Right. I do want to focus on the positive here and the fact that you were really embraced, obviously, by just the whole country of Israel, right? Tell me how that felt when you were recognized by the government. I mean, that must have been amazing.
You know, again, it's humbling. I feel that it was important to let the Israeli people know that America does have their back. I met with many of the hostage families who feel abandoned, because frankly, they have been. When was the last time this administration mentioned the hostages, much less 5 American hostages? So to be able to tell them and meet with them, the fortitude of the Israeli people are amazing. The announcement before that concert was, in event of missile attack, please take cover, and nobody left. 3 hours later, Iran launched their attack. The fortitude of the Israeli people is truly inspiring, and coming back from that experience, I have changed. It has changed me. And I think it's important for all of us to stand up and support them. This is not about Israel versus Hamas. This is about civilization against those who want to tear it down. And that's why I'm speaking up and singing for it.
You know, I want to ask you before I let you go, just when you wake up every day and you do see the headlines and you see, you know, protests on campuses or people being spit on or that they don't belong, you know, how does that make you feel as an artist who is very passionate about people who are victims?
Well, I was at UCLA, my alma mater, this morning doing a press conference, talking to some UCLA students who are thinking about moving to Israel because they're safer under Iranian missile attack than they are at UCLA. As you have been reporting, Jewish students have been barred from moving across campus. attacked, sent to the hospital. Jewish students have been subject to a wristband system where there are basically students with checkpoints asking kids, what religion are you? And if they say Jewish, they're barred from continuing. This is at UCLA in Los Angeles. It is disgusting. It is shameful. It is a moral stain on this university that will never be washed clean. So we need to stand up for those kids, stand up for the right thing, and also educate some of the protesters that have been seduced by this hate, this evil. I feel for them. We're losing our kids, so we can't lose them as well.
Yeah. John, I mean, I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us. I never thought we would have this conversation about someone with a wristband ask their religion. It's a moment that I never thought I would face. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we support your cause, sir.
Thank you. Look forward to coming back. Thank you, everybody.
Coming up after the break, the GoFundMe page for the UNC students who saved Old Glory just continues to grow as more campuses see counter demonstrations against the anti-Israel protests. Have the good guys begun to get their upper hand on college campuses? Coming up. Breaking news on the campus protest movement. It's making its way Midwest. As I mentioned, look at these live pictures of St. Louis. Protesters are marching there. There's also another protest forming now at the new school in New York City, at a new school rather. NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer is there on the ground for us tonight. So Brooke, what can you tell us about the latest? Tell us where you are, tell us what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and has it's progressed throughout the day today.
Yeah, Elizabeth. Well, behind me, the crowd's sort of starting to disperse a little bit, but just moments ago, this was a group of about 2,000 people who quite literally took to the streets of Manhattan. They marched here to Washington Square Park for a pro-Palestinian demonstration. Again, they're slowly starting to disperse. Things have been very peaceful. But of course, watching all of this play out is NYPD. Officers came out here. We have some officers who are here in their riot gear as well with their helmets and batons. Of course, again, watching all of this play out, even though it has been very peaceful. But I just wanted to mention, too, Elizabeth, I've been covering these protests for over a week now. I was in Austin, Texas last week, and then all over Manhattan all this week. And really, these protests just keep popping up. Things do not seem to be slowing down, even as we head into the weekend, Elizabeth.
All right, Brooke Schaefer, stay safe. We appreciate your reporting. Like you said, you've been covering it across the country for the better half of a week. And as these protests spread, we are seeing an uprising of patriotic students fighting back, many taking matters into their own hands, confronting protesters head on. It happened at Rutgers and Ole Miss earlier today. The movement started at UNC Chapel Hill, a group of fraternity brothers there defending the American flag when protesters were trying to take it down. And now a GoFundMe in support of those fraternity brothers is up to more than $500,000. And they might be getting a concert on campus headlined by country music artist John Rich. So Leland spoke with him as well as the Hero fraternity brothers last night. And here's just a piece of that interview.
You guys just did what you thought was the right thing all of a sudden. Are you surprised by the result?
I'm not. First of all, thank you for having us. We're all happy to be here. When we saw our brothers there defending that flag, there was no doubt in any of our minds that we were going to go and join them. I'm glad that it was able to be put to an end the way that it did eventually. But yeah, we were there defending our brothers, and there wasn't going to be anything that was going to stop us from going to that flag. All
right, but Trevor, think about this, right? Okay, a couple days ago, you guys did the right thing. You weren't doing it for fame or for glory. You were doing it because you thought it was the right thing to do. You were there with your brothers who were taking a stand, and now you're on TV with John Rich, who's going to play you a concert with $400,000 worth of free beer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can all agree that we didn't anticipate that part of it would occur, but we did know that it's important to stand strong on our beliefs and to be a representation of what we hope to see for Jewish students and for students who believe in our flag and democracy across the country.
Yeah. Brendan, tell me what's happened in the past 24 hours, some of the conversations you've had.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we definitely got a lot more media attention. And for us, it's not about fame. It's not about coolness. It's about bringing attention to our message. Stand up for what you believe in. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. For me, it's when your values are questioned, that's when it matters. It's easy to believe in something when it's easy. But when people question that, that's when it's important to stand by them.
And boys, I just want to tell you this. I hope that other people like yourself at other universities across this country do what you did and do it exactly how you did it. You handled it absolutely perfectly, and you made us all very, very proud.
I don't know, John, I'm not a musician, but I feel there could be perhaps a song written about this situation.
There could be. Once we pick this date and figure out when we're going to do this, we may have to write a specific song about it. But I will tell you guys, you know the greatest generation, that would be your great-grandparents probably. And you wonder why they call them that, the greatest generation. It's because they were about your age when World War II broke out, and they all signed up, and they all went to work back at home. Every man, woman, and child pulled for the flag, and we beat Germany and Japan and Mussolini all at the same time. And it's been a long time since I've seen young people do what you guys did and remind us whose shoulders we stand on. And again, very proud of you guys for what you've done.
Fellas, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege. My father called me this morning and told me that he'd read, based on what you guys did, the letter of Sullivan Ballou, who was a volunteer in the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry, died at Bull Run. And he wrote to his wife right before he died in battle. I know how strongly American civilization now leans upon the triumph of the government, how great a debt we owe to those who went before through the blood and suffering of the revolution. And I'm willing, perfectly willing, to lay down all my joys in this life to help maintain this government and to pay that debt. And John, I'm thinking that in so much of America now, there is a hope that there's people like these young men, and that these men give hope, that there's people who still believe in the values we all believe in.
They're out there. I mean, we see them at our shows. You just saw it with these guys. I'm telling you, you're going to see other people. You just saw it at Ole Miss about 2 hours ago. I saw that posted. They're out there singing the Star Spangled Banner out on their campus. I think this is going to catch fire and go all across the country. Think about what young people must be thinking right now, what these gentlemen here must be thinking, looking at our economy, looking at our border, looking at their future and going, man, how is this going to work out? I mean, this is rough looking, and they're in debt at college. I mean, it's a lot to look at. So if there was ever a time for young people to stand up and grab this horse by the reins and get it back on the road, it's right now, and I hope they do it by the tens of millions.
All right, we'll be watching. Coming up, Britney Spears says there's no there there after paramedics were called to her West Hollywood hotel room. So what do all the Free Britney folks think of their push to free her from her father's watch? What do you think? We'll have a conversation coming up. Welcome back. New concerns tonight for the health of Britney Spears after pictures surfaced of her looking disheveled outside a West Hollywood hotel just this week. The singer was seen clutching a pillow. You've probably seen it. She was wearing a blanket with an EMTs and police present. She wasn't taken away in an ambulance. And the next day, she said it was fake news on Instagram before offering yet another explanation.
You know, I really twisted my ankle last night like an idiot just to show proof. Don't look at my feet. I need a manicure. It's so bad. Idiot here tries to do a leap in the living room at the chateau, and I fell, embarrassed myself, and that's it. Paramedics came to my door illegally, of course, caused this huge scene, which was so unnecessary, and all I needed was ice.
A lot to digest here. NewsNation entertainment reporter and KTLA entertainment anchor Sam Rubin joins me now. Sam, you know, when she was free of the conservatorship, we were all really just waiting to see her flourish. What have we seen?
What we've seen is somebody, Elizabeth, who is plainly unwell.
And I think, though the conservatorship was not the ideal circumstance for her, this freedom is not necessarily the ideal circumstance for her either. She has a lawyer who tends to look after her, but there is deep concern about Britney's well-being. A lot of these social media posts seem completely unhinged. There's concern about excessive expenses in terms of vacations and other things. I worry about Britney. I've worried about Britney publicly for a long time, and I think a lot of other people do.
Yeah, I think initially when the behavior appeared erratic, it was almost like a little bit silly, a little bit funny. And then I felt like some of those voices got really quiet. It wasn't really funny anymore. It appeared that, you know, as you mentioned, she was unwell. And then we get these explanations that it's a body double. We get these theories that it's her mother. You know, are we hearing from her family members at all?
We're not really hearing from her family members. I think she's deeply estranged from her family, and that is part and parcel of what I think many fans and those who care about Britney fear is an increasingly isolated Britney Spears. There was to be the husband that was going to save everything. Well, they got divorced. The last boyfriend, quote unquote, a bad boyfriend. They fought in Las Vegas. They fought at the Chateau Marmont. I think Britney needs a guiding hand, a helpful hand, a loving hand, and doesn't seem to be able to find one. And I think that's why, in large part, you know, these social media posts are outreaches to the public. I don't want to characterize them as, quote unquote, cries for help, but they're cries for something.
I know. And we only have about 15 seconds, Sam, but are you concerned about the relationship of Paul Richard Solis? Is that correct? That gentleman that she's in a relationship with? Concerned? Yes or no?
Yes, I think people think that he's not necessarily the best person for Britney.
All right. Sam, grateful for your time. Like we said, hugely concerning. I think a lot of folks are worried about her. This was a woman who had just so much potential. And we'll keep in touch with you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And of course, you at home, thank you for watching On Balance. We're grateful for your time. Leland will be back on Monday. And for now, it is Chris Cuomo.